Time for me to talk about the legendary Little Richard, who passed away at the age of 87 on Saturday. By all means, he lived a full life and lived a good life, but that doesn't matter. It's still upsetting when a legend like Little Richard leaves us, because it makes me realize that we're losing an entire era of rock and roll greats. Not many left from that time. We still have Jerry Lee Lewis and Dion of the Belmonts fame. They're still knocking about. Actually, Dion, last time I checked, was still recording some kick-ass songs. But there aren't that many people from the 50s era who really can be considered architects of rock and roll. The sad thing about Little Richard is that I feel like he had been criminally forgotten. Maybe it's also because the people who mimicked him or were very much influenced by him didn't think well enough to pay tribute to him. But without him, there would never have been a David Bowie. Without him, there would never have been a Prince. And I think we're getting to the point where the flashy pop stars of today may not even have any idea of who Little Richard was. But Little Richard was one of the great architects of rock and roll. His career started in gospel and jazz-inflected R&B, and what he is known for is bringing unparalleled sexuality into it. Like, his songs were racy, and some people thought them immoral. Or morally wrong. Like, he was a black and gay man. And that was part of the reason why the record labels had white artists like Pat Boone re-record his songs, outselling Little Richard in the process. But the fact that Little Richard was still able to enter the charts is rightly considered as historical. At a time of huge racial segregation, the kids were still buying the records their parents would most likely have told them not to buy. And we can even look at that as a positive form of teenage rebellion. So anyways, there's a statue in Washington, D.C. of a man named Albert Pike who, is considered to be one of the founders of the KKK. I understand that he wasn't necessarily actively involved with the group, but he was an enthusiastic observer of the Ku Klux Klan. But if that guy has a statue in Washington, D.C., well, why can't Little Richard have a statue? I mean, with all that he did with his music, from the woos and the ha's that were picked up by the Beatles to just encouraging blacks and whites and people of all races to dance together. And then there was that sexual charge in his music. And I was listening to a good few of the interviews he gave in his life and came across one by Tom Snyder from 1997, where he actually talks about the flamboyance that I think provides us with an incredible insight into a forgotten world and society. So I'm going to play a clip where not only does he talk about why he wore those flashy clothes and makeup, and how he was able to represent an unapologetically fluid sexuality, but also how the world behaved at the time and where the women stood within that world.
It was written of you. Now, you consider the time when you rose to fame in this country, the 1950s. Here you came on black,
yes,
and gay,
yes,
and talented,
yes,
and loud. But the one thing they wrote about you when you came on, you were absolutely 100% sure of yourself.
That's right.
Where did your confidence come from?
Well, my confidence...
you own the stage.
Well, what happened with my confidence is, my confidence came because I felt at the time, it wasn't just a gay thing. What it was is, to be black and to work for white girls, I had to look that way. If I didn't wear makeup and look feminine, I couldn't work the white clubs. They wouldn't let me be with the white girls.
That's right.
So the more feminine I look, they didn't mind me being with the white women. They said, "Oh, Richard, ain't nothing to him. Ain't a thing to him." And when James Brown come, they say, "You better watch that boy." But with me, they say, "Ain't nothing." Because, I had on the makeup. I had the eyelashes.
You weren't a threat.
And yes, I wore it all. From wah-wah to woo-woo. I had it all on, even sometimes boo-boo. I had it all. And so, but I found out that when I wore these things, and the more feminine that I looked, the more I was accepted. Because, I wasn't rejected because, wasn't nobody afraid of me. I wasn't a threat to be around a white girl. You understand? Nice
I understand.
looking.
But now,
yes.
If you didn't want to, you wouldn't have to wear it, would you?
No, don't have to wear it at all now. But now I like it.
Okay.
I like it. I done got used to looking pretty now.
That's okay.
And so now I put it on, in and out, before I go to bed. I don't feel right when I go out without it. You know, and sometimes I forget to put it on, Tom. And my son tell me, his name is Danny, he said, Pops, you look good. And see, because that is my complexion. You know, when I put it on and it come out, you know, that is me. You know, that's me.
I believe you.
Yeah. And so when I just want everybody to look on television, that is me for real. You know, I'm an old tan Indian looking boy from Georgia. And so when I put it on, everybody says, oh, he's so beautiful. I'm not conceited. You know, I never been conceited. I'm convinced. but they told me, said, boy, said Little Richard, and the police put me in jail one time in El Paso, Texas. He said, what are you? I said, I don't know. He said, you're something. I said, yeah, I am, but I don't know what it is either. He said, but why all these women are screaming over you? Now, these are Mexican girls in El Paso. But did you know James Brown, Guitar Slim, Smiley Lewis, Baxter, they would get at those guys, but when I would come through, they wouldn't bother me. They would say, let him in, because the way I looked, I would wear all these flashy clothes, and my skin looked, and they wouldn't bother, because you wasn't a threat to them with the women.
And the women was a big thing back then.
Oh, yes,
the
but they didn't
biggest thing.
But you know, that's where everything is. They didn't want you to bother them women. You know, to leave them women, they don't mind me being with Johnny, but don't you be with Sally. Especially if she's long and tall.
Isn't that fascinating? And I also love how Little Richard can just communicate things, sometimes heavy issues and delicate themes in his outrageous and flamboyant way. He was truly one of a kind. People may not know this, but some of his songs actually depict a very tormented world. I know that people like to think of his songs as half comedy numbers, but then you encounter songs about blunt and disarmingly frank depictions of violence and hardships. Unexpected when coming from a figure like Little Richard. But that was him, man. And I really hope they do put up that statue. Now what do you say we listen to one of his most loved songs?
Gonna tell